Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. So you guys sent in some really interesting stuff about, why things that you really want sometimes feel constantly out of reach.
Yeah.
And we have an article here that digs into that very idea.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's, that classic experience where you feel like you're always striving towards something, but the result just never quite seems to materialize.
Right. And this article kind of flips the script on what we usually think about achieving our goals.
Yeah.
Saying that maybe it's the intensity of wanting something so much that actually pushes it further away.
Hmm.
A
Interesting.
little counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, we usually tend to double down on desire when we want something, Like
Okay.
if we just focus all of our energy and willpower on it, then we can somehow bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to be.
Right.
But this article suggests a totally different approach.
Exactly. And it uses this great analogy of wanting something, being
Yeah.
like begging the universe to ghost you. So I immediately pictured this, like someone who's really craving pizza.
Mm.
They're standing in their kitchen just like radiating this hunger for it.
Yeah.
But, no matter how much they want it, that pizza's not going to magically appear.
Right.
It just makes that feeling of not having it even stronger.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It really highlights how wanting something often just makes us focus on what's missing.
Right.
It's like we're constantly reminding ourselves that we don't have the thing we want.
Exactly. And the article goes on to talk about this thing called the frequency game,
Okay.
where basically constantly wanting something sends out this signal of not having it.
Hmm.
And that's not the right frequency to attract the things we desire.
Right. It's like trying to tune into a radio station, but you're on the wrong frequency.
Exactly. You're just going to get a bunch of static.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this whole frequency idea?
Well, it makes sense to me if you think about it metaphorically.
Okay.
Our dominant emotional state kind of acts like a filter. If we're always focused on what we lack and what's missing, that becomes our default setting.
Hmm.
And then the article asks this really interesting question. It says, if you already had what you wanted, would you still be wanting it?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I mean, the answer is pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
You already had that pizza, you wouldn't still be craving it.
Exactly. You'd be enjoying it.
Right, you'd be eating it. So the very act of wanting something means that it's currently absent in our minds and our hearts.
Okay. So if wanting something too much is sending out these not having signals, how do we change that? What's the alternative?
Well, the article suggests shifting our frequency by acting as if we already have what we desire.
Okay.
But it's important to clarify that this isn't about pretending that everything's perfect,
Right.
when it's clearly not. It's more nuanced than that.
It's not about, spending a ton of money that you don't have to try to feel rich.
Right, exactly.
It's more about embodying the feeling of someone who's already achieved their goals.
Yes, it's about stepping into that future version of yourself right now in this moment.
Okay.
The author actually shares a story about a time when they were broke
Uh-huh.
and they decided to shift their mindset about money and start acting as if they were wealthy. And it wasn't about flaunting money or anything like that. It was about changing their internal perspective.
Yeah.
And that shift led to some unexpected opportunities.
That's really interesting
It is.
because it implies that our internal state can actually change our external reality. So
Exactly.
it's like you're suddenly open to possibilities that you might have missed before because you were too focused on what you lacked.
Right. Our internal state shapes how we see the world and the actions we take.
Uh-huh.
And that influences the kinds of opportunities that we attract.
Right. And that brings us to what the author calls the secret sauce,
Which is,
not needing it. So what are your initial thoughts on that?
well, it sounds a little strange at first, right?
It does.
If you don't need something, why would you even bother pursuing it?
Right. Won't that just kill your motivation?
Well, the article explains that not needing something is very different from not wanting it.
Okay.
It's about detaching your sense of self-worth from whether or not you achieve a specific outcome.
So you're still striving for the goal,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not letting it define your happiness.
Exactly. And the author gives a couple of good examples,
Okay.
like their experience with math in school.
Hmm.
They found that they actually did better on tests when they stopped putting so much pressure on themselves.
Interesting.
And they weren't so worried about the outcome.
So it's like that desperate need for a good grade was actually holding them back.
Right. And they also talked about dating
Uh-huh.
and how when they stopped needing approval from others, they actually became more attractive.
It's like that neediness repels people.
Exactly.
Have you noticed that in your own life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all have.
Like when you're trying too hard, it often backfires.
Right.
But when you're relaxed and confident, things tend to flow more easily.
Yes, and the article makes a similar point about finances.
Hmm.
They contrast people who are struggling financially and always worried about money
Right.
with people who are wealthy and don't really need money to feel good about themselves.
So it seems like having that internal sense of security is really key.
I think so.
It's like that's what really attracts good things into your life.
Right.
And to illustrate this, the author uses this fun analogy about the universe being like a cosmic girl.
Ah, yes, I like that one.
So tell me about it.
Well, the analogy is that the universe is this smart, gorgeous, and slightly sassy woman.
Okay.
And if you're constantly chasing after her and being needy, it's going to push her away.
Right.
But if you're confident and self-assured and not desperately seeking her approval, she's going to be much more intrigued.
I like that.
It's a playful way to visualize this energetic dynamic.
Yeah, neediness doesn't really attract anyone.
Exactly. But contentment and genuine confidence do.
Okay, so this all sounds good in theory,
Uh-huh.
but how do we actually put it into practice?
Well, the article talks about being rich before you're rich.
Right, so what does that actually mean?
It means embodying the qualities and the mindset of the person you would be if you already had what you want.
Okay, but it's not about pretending.
No, it's about cultivating an internal state that aligns with your goal.
So you're not faking it.
Right. You're shifting your perspective.
Hmm.
And the author has this technique where whenever they catch themselves really wanting something,
Yeah.
they consciously change their internal dialogue.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on the lack, they tell themselves, it's already working, I've got this.
Wow.
And then they try to act in a way that's consistent with that belief.
That's a pretty powerful reframe.
It is.
It takes you out of that future-oriented state of wanting
Right.
and brings you into the present moment with confidence.
Exactly. And the article has this exercise for our listeners.
Okay, what is it?
Try pretending that you're already financially secure,
Hmm.
not by spending recklessly, but by feeling the relief, the freedom, and the lack of anxiety that comes with financial security.
Interesting.
It's an experiment in shifting your self-perception.
Yeah.
Now, the article also talks about the illusion of time.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the idea is that time isn't really a straight line like we often think it is.
Uh-huh.
It's more cyclical.
And the takeaway there is...
The present moment is what really matters.
Right.
Waiting for some future date to finally be happy is kind of missing the point.
Because that happiness needs to be cultivated right now. It
Exactly.
goes back to that idea of as above, so below,
Yes.
as within, so without.
Our internal state directly affects our external reality.
So if we're always projecting our happiness into the future, we're postponing the very feelings that could help us attract those things we want.
Right. And the article calls this the emotional hack.
Okay.
It's about accessing those feelings of happiness, security, and confidence in the present moment.
Instead of waiting for something external to happen.
Exactly. So instead of saying, I'll be happy when I get that promotion, you find ways to feel accomplished and valued in your current job.
It's like creating that feeling state in advance.
Yes. And then the article asks you to think about times in your own life when you performed really well.
Yeah.
Because you weren't overthinking things or needing a specific outcome.
I can definitely think of a few times like that.
Me too.
It's like those moments of effortless flow where you're just in the zone.
Exactly.
I remember a friend of mine who plays soccer,
Okay.
and he's a pretty good player,
Uh-huh.
but he plays his best when it's just a casual game with friends. When there's no pressure, he just shines.
Interesting.
But as soon as it's a must-win situation, he gets all tense and his performance suffers.
Right.
It's like the need to win actually gets in his way.
That makes sense.
And the author had a similar experience with money.
Really?
They noticed that it flowed more freely when they weren't so attached to it.
It sounds like detaching from the outcome can actually lead to better results.
I think so.
So what would you say are the main takeaways here for our listeners?
Well, first, I'd say become aware of when you're in that state of intense wanting.
Yeah.
Second, consciously shift your mindset to, I don't need this. I'm good either way. Third, start acting as if the outcome is already a reality. And finally, quiet that inner voice of doubt.
That's a great summary.
And he also gives us a little homework assignment to try applying these principles to a small, insignificant desire.
Like what?
Like finding a good parking spot or getting a text back from someone.
Interesting.
It's a way to test the waters and see if it actually works.
Yeah, it's a low-stakes way to experiment.
Right.
So the key takeaway here is to shift from a state of lack and wanting to a state of contentment and confident expectation.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how much our internal state really shapes our external reality.
It's a fascinating question.
What if we could change our lives just by changing our internal state?
It's definitely something to think about.
Well, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Until next time.
See you then.
Bye.